Most people will never understand what I'm about to tell you. They'll keep chasing, keep begging, keep shrinking themselves to fit into spaces that were never built for them. But you're here, and that already makes you different. Niccolò Machiavelli didn't write The Prince for the weak. He wrote it for those willing to see the world as it truly is, not as they wish it to be. And here is the world as it truly is. No one is coming to save you. Not your friends, not your family, not the person you've been losing sleep over. No one. The moment you accepted that someone else held the key to your happiness, you handed them your power willingly, quietly, like a man walking into his own cage and pulling the door shut behind him. But that ends today. Because the most dangerous shift a man can make isn't getting stronger, richer, or smarter. It's the moment he decides, coldly, clearly, without apology, that he is the most important project in his life, not arrogance, strategy. Drop "I am lion" in the comments right now if you're ready to remember who you truly are. Number 2, the trap of neediness. Here is what no one ever taught you. Neediness is not just an emotion, it is a signal, a frequency you broadcast to every room you walk into, to every person you interact with, to every opportunity that passes through your life. And the world reads that signal before you ever open your mouth. When you chase a person, you tell them you have nothing better to do. When you beg for attention, you announce that your time holds no value. When you shrink your standards to keep someone comfortable, you declare to the universe that you do not believe you deserve better. And the universe, cold, indifferent, brutally honest, agrees with you every single time. Machiavelli understood something that most modern men have completely forgotten. Power is not taken. Power is projected. It radiates from a man who has decided deep in his bones that his presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. The needy man destroys his own leverage before the game even begins. He shows all his cards. He reveals his hunger. He lets the other side know exactly how much they matter, and in doing so, hands them a weapon to use against him at will. Dark psychology teaches this with ruthless clarity. Whoever needs the outcome least holds the most power. Read that again. Whoever needs the outcome least holds the most power. This is not theory. This is the invisible law governing every negotiation, every relationship, every silent power struggle happening around you right now. The man who can walk away and mean it is the man who never has to, because people don't value what comes easily. They never have, and they never will. Scarcity creates desire. Distance creates longing. Indifference, real bone-deep indifference, born not from bitterness but from self-possession, is the most magnetic force a man can carry. So ask yourself honestly, what are you broadcasting right now? Comment, "I am the prize" below if you're starting to understand the game you've been playing wrong your entire life. Number 3, the philosophy of self-mastery. Machiavelli said it plainly. A man who is not first master of himself can be master of nothing else. And yet, every single day, millions of men wake up and immediately hand control of their emotions, their mood, their entire inner world to external circumstances. Their phone buzzes, and their peace is gone. Someone ignores them, and their confidence collapses. A plan falls apart, and their entire identity crumbles with it. This is not living. This is being a leaf in someone else's storm. Self-mastery is not about suppressing what you feel. That is a misunderstanding that weakens men instead of building them. Self-mastery is about becoming so deeply rooted in who you are that the storm can rage around you, and you remain unmoved, unshaken, and absolutely unreadable. Because here is what the cold science of power confirms. The man who controls his reactions controls the narrative. Always. In every room, in every conversation, in every conflict, the man who flinches first loses. The man who speaks first from emotion loses. The man who needs to explain himself, justify himself, or defend himself to people who have already decided what they think loses before he even begins. Marcus Aurelius understood this thousands of years before modern psychology put a label on it. He ruled an empire not because he was the loudest man in the room, but because he was the most disciplined. He mastered his mind before he ever attempted to master the world around him. And that is the sequence most men get completely backwards. They try to control outcomes before they have ever learned to control themselves. They try to command respect before they have built the internal architecture that makes respect inevitable. You cannot project power you do not possess. You cannot attract what you have not become worthy of. The work begins inside, ruthless, unglamorous, and deeply private. Commit to that work right now. Comment, "I master myself first," below, and mean every single word of it. Number 4. The art of strategic withdrawal. Listen carefully, because this is where most men make the most costly mistake of their lives. When things start to feel uncertain, when someone starts pulling away, when the dynamic shifts and the energy changes, the average man panics. He leans in harder, he reaches out more, he doubles down on his presence, his effort, his emotional investment, desperately trying to reverse something he does not yet understand. And in doing so, he accelerates his own defeat. What he should do, what the strategically minded man always does, is the exact opposite. He withdraws. Not out of pettiness, not out of games or manipulation for its own sake, but out of a deep, unshakable understanding that space is power, silence is strategy, and absence, when deployed correctly, is the single most commanding move on the board. Machiavelli was ruthlessly clear on this principle. A wise man does nothing that does not serve his position. Every move must be calculated, every action must have purpose, and sometimes, most times, the most powerful action available to you is no action at all. Think about what happens in nature. The predator does not sprint after every movement in the grass. It watches, it waits. It conserves its energy with terrifying patience, while the prey, unaware, moves closer on its own. That is not weakness. That is the highest form of strategic intelligence. Psychology calls this the withdrawal effect, and its impact on human behavior is profound. When you make yourself less available, people begin to question your value upward. When you stop flooding someone with your attention, they begin to wonder what redirected it. When you go quiet where you were once loud, your silence becomes louder than anything you ever said. But here is the crucial distinction that separates strategy from bitterness. You do not withdraw to punish. You withdraw because you have something more important to return to: yourself, your mission, your growth, your becoming. The man who retreats into his purpose is not running away from the world. He is building something the world will eventually have no choice but to turn toward. Every empire in history was built in private long before it was visible in public. Your withdrawal is not your weakness, it is your construction phase. The world does not need to see the foundation being poured. It only needs to witness the finished monument standing where nothing stood before. Go silent. Go deep. Go to work. Comment. Move in silence below if you understand that your greatest chapter is being written right now in private. Number 5. The power of becoming unavailable to everything that diminishes you. There is a version of you that exists beyond every apology you were never owed, beyond every relationship that quietly drained you, beyond every room where you made yourself smaller so others could feel larger. That version of you is not a fantasy. It is not some distant, unreachable ideal reserved for the exceptional few. It is who you actually are when you strip away every habit of self-betrayal you have accumulated over years of people-pleasing, over-explaining, and tolerating what you should have walked away from the moment it revealed itself. And the path to that version of yourself begins with a single, non-negotiable decision. You become unavailable. Not selectively, not occasionally, not when it is convenient or socially acceptable, completely and ruthlessly unavailable to everything and everyone that diminishes who you are becoming. Unavailable to conversations that go nowhere and drain everything. Unavailable to relationships built on what you provide rather than who you are. Unavailable to environments that celebrate your stagnation because your growth makes uncomfortable the people who chose to stay still. Unavailable to the version of yourself that apologizes for having standards, that shrinks at the first sign of conflict, that mistakes endurance of disrespect for loyalty. Machiavelli understood that a prince who tries to please everyone ends up serving no one, least of all himself. The attempt to be all things to all people is not generosity. It is the slow, silent erasure of your own identity, and an erased man has no power, he has no presence, he has no gravity. He simply exists as a function of other people's needs, a supporting character in stories that were never his responsibility to carry. Psychology is equally unsparing on this truth. The people who drain you are not always malicious. Some of them are simply operating on a frequency of scarcity, of fear, of unconscious need, and they will pull you down to that frequency if you remain within range long enough. Protection is not cruelty. Boundaries are not walls built to keep people out. They are the architecture of a man who has decided that his inner world is sacred and that entry into it must be earned, not assumed, not demanded, and never taken for granted. Because here is what happens the moment you become genuinely unavailable to what diminishes you. Everything that is built for your level begins to find you. Opportunities locate men who look like they belong to them. Respect gravitates toward those who already carry it within themselves. Quality, in people, in experiences, in outcomes, is drawn magnetically toward the man who has quietly, unapologetically raised his own standard of what he will and will not accept into his life. You do not find your level by searching for it. You find it by becoming it, so completely, so consistently, and so unshakably that everything beneath it simply stops being able to reach you. That is not coldness. That is clarity. That is the kind of inner revolution that changes not just how you move through the world, but how the world moves around you. Comment, I am unavailable to what diminishes me, below, and say it like a man who has already made the decision and will never look back. Number 6, the cold truth about attraction and power. Let me tell you something the world has been desperately trying to hide from you, behind motivational posters, behind hollow affirmations, behind every feel-good lie designed to keep you comfortable in your mediocrity. Attraction, real, deep, undeniable attraction, has absolutely nothing to do with how much you give. It has nothing to do with how available you are, how accommodating you are, how perfectly you mold yourself to fit what you believe someone else wants to see. Real attraction is not manufactured through effort directed outward. It is generated through transformation directed inward. And the moment you understand that at a cellular level, your entire reality begins to reorganize itself, not around the approval you've been chasing, but around the man you are becoming. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote that men are driven more by the appearance of virtue than by virtue itself. But let's go deeper, into territory most men are too uncomfortable to face honestly. It is not the appearance of power that attracts. It is the essence of it, the real thing, the unperformed, undiluted, quietly dangerous presence of a man who has done the internal work so thoroughly that his power is not something he switches on for others. It is simply what he is in private, when no one is watching and there is nothing to prove. That essence cannot be faked forever. People feel it before they understand it. They respond to it before they can explain it. A man who has mastered himself walks into a room and something shifts, not because he demanded attention, not because he announced himself, but because the energy he carries is so fundamentally different from the noise around him that the contrast is felt before it is understood. This is what dark psychology reveals about attraction at its deepest level. We are not drawn to what chases us. We are drawn to what exists, completely, powerfully, without needing us. The person who needs nothing from you is infinitely more compelling than the one who needs everything, because need communicates scarcity, not just scarcity of resources, but scarcity of self. And nothing repels faster than a man who feels incomplete without validation. Contrast that with a man who has built his life into something so absorbing, so purposeful, so undeniably his own that his attention becomes rare. When that man looks at you, you feel it. When he speaks, his words carry weight. When he includes you in his world, it feels like selection, like you were chosen by someone who had every reason and every ability to choose otherwise. That is the power of a man who stopped chasing and started becoming. And becoming is not passive. It is the most aggressive commitment you will ever make to yourself. It forces you to examine everything, your body, your mind, your habits, your circle, your standards, your discipline, your private thoughts when no one is watching, and ask one brutal question. Does this reflect the man I am building or the man I am trying to escape? There is no neutral ground. Every day, every decision is a vote. You are either becoming more magnetic or more forgettable. And those private votes, repeated daily, eventually shape a man the world cannot ignore. You don't chase that outcome. You become the kind of man it was always going to find. Comment, I attract because I become, below, because that single sentence holds more truth than most men will ever confront in a lifetime. Number 7, the Machiavellian mind, thinking several moves ahead. Understand this clearly. The world you are operating in is not fair. It never was. The rules you were taught as a child. Work hard and you'll be rewarded. Be kind and kindness will return. Be honest and the world will honor you. Were not lies. They were incomplete truths. They described how the world should work, while quietly hiding how it actually works. And in that gap, most men lose everything. They bring sincerity into environments built for strategy. They bring emotion into rooms designed for calculation. They give their full heart in situations already decided by cold logic. Niccolò Machiavelli didn't write for comfort, he wrote for clarity. His philosophy cuts through illusion like a blade, exposing the real anatomy of power beneath the surface. And here is what sits at the core of that anatomy. The man who thinks several moves ahead will always dominate the man who only reacts. This is the Machiavellian mind in its purest form, not manipulation for ego. Not cruelty disguised as intelligence, but disciplined, strategic awareness, the ability to see further than everyone else in the room and move accordingly. While others are reacting, you are positioning. While others are emotional, you are calculating. While others are focused on what just happened, you are already preparing for what happens next. This is how power operates. Dark psychology makes it even clearer. The most powerful person in any situation is rarely the one responding. It is the one who designed the situation in the first place. They don't react to the environment, they shape it. They don't wait for opportunity, they engineer it. But this level of thinking demands something uncomfortable: emotional detachment. The ability to pause when others rush, to observe when others speak, to gather information while others reveal themselves, to move only when the move is precise, not fast, not impulsive, but strategically inevitable. Because the Machiavellian mind is not playing for today, it is always playing for what today creates tomorrow. Every interaction is data, every conversation is leverage, every person who underestimates you is an advantage stored for later. You don't correct them, you let them misread you. You don't expose your strategy, you protect it. Because surprise, combined with preparation, is one of the most lethal weapons in a reactive world. Your greatest asset is not your appearance, not your network, not your reputation. It is your mind, how it processes, how it plans, how it stays calm in chaos. Sharpen it daily, feed it with philosophy, history, and the strategies of those who understood power at its highest level. Study not just what they did, but why they did it, what they saw that others missed, what they understood about human nature that allowed them to move through the world like water, adapting, flowing, unstoppable not through force, but through precision. Comment: I think in moves, not moments below, because that mindset separates the man who builds power from the man who watches it from a distance. Number 8. The loneliness of the elevated man. No one prepares you for this part. Every conversation about power, discipline, and self-mastery sounds clean from the outside. It sounds like growth, respect, admiration. But the truth, the uncomfortable, unfiltered truth, is that real elevation is lonely. Sometimes deeply, painfully lonely. And you need to understand this now, because if you're not prepared for it, that loneliness will pull you back to a level you've already outgrown. When you truly change, not on the surface, but at your core, the first thing you feel is not applause, it is resistance. The people who are comfortable with the old version of you will feel the shift immediately. Your boundaries will be called coldness. Your silence will be labeled arrogance. Your standards will be seen as ego. Your discipline will make undisciplined people uncomfortable, and they will try, consciously or unconsciously, to pull you back. Because your growth exposes their stagnation. Machiavelli understood that the prince who rises must expect to rise largely alone. Not because greatness demands isolation as a virtue, but because the journey inward, the ruthless, unglamorous excavation of everything weak within you, is a path no one can walk for you. It is yours alone. Marcus Aurelius, nature itself, and Niccolò Machiavelli all arrived at the same quiet conclusion through different roads. The man who chooses to elevate himself beyond the average must spend a significant part of his journey in a space the average cannot access or understand. Dark psychology cuts even deeper into this truth. The elevated man becomes a mirror, and most people cannot stand what they see reflected back at them. Your discipline exposes their lack of it. Your standards expose their absence. Your refusal to settle exposes every compromise they convinced themselves was wisdom, and instead of confronting that discomfort, most will resent the mirror. They will distance themselves. They will twist your strength into a flaw. They will create narratives about you, not to define you, but to protect themselves from the truth your existence quietly reveals. And you must let them, without bitterness, without the need to explain, without the need to be understood by those who have already chosen not to understand. Because here is the part most men miss. The loneliness of elevation is not empty. It is full of clarity that noise would have drowned, full of self-knowledge that distraction would have buried, full of a deep, unshakable relationship with yourself that can only be built in silence, in solitude, in the private hours where no one is watching and nothing is being performed. And eventually, not immediately, but inevitably, that elevation finds its own circle. Not loud, performative connections built on shared mediocrity, but quiet recognition. Between men who have walked through their own fire and arrived somewhere real. That kind of recognition needs no explanation. It exists between those who paid the price to understand. Embrace the loneliness. It is not your punishment. It is your tuition. And what it buys you is a version of yourself no crowd, no validation, no external approval could ever create. Comment, my solitude is my strength below, and understand this. The greatest men in history were not built in crowds. They were built in silence. Number 9. The moment everything shifts when you become the prize. There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when everything changes. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't arrive with validation. It happens in the middle of an ordinary day. But in that moment, you are no longer ordinary. It is when you realize, not just intellectually, but deep in your body, that you have stopped waiting for permission, stopped waiting to be chosen, stopped waiting for recognition. And in that stillness, everything shifts. The energy you once wasted chasing approval, attention, validation, it reverses. It stops flowing outward and begins flowing inward, then outward again in a completely different way. And the world responds. Not because of luck, not because of magic, but because you changed your internal position. Niccolò Machiavelli spoke of the man who becomes so formidable that fortune appears to favor him, not because luck changed, but because he became ready. Psychology explains this through perceived value. Human beings respond to signals, and the strongest signal you can emit is completeness. The unmistakable presence of someone who is already whole, already focused, already moving forward with or without anyone else. That signal does not beg. It does not adjust, it does not perform, it simply exists, and it attracts. Opportunities begin appearing. People who ignored you start noticing. Doors that were closed begin opening, not because you tried harder, but because you became someone who cannot be ignored. Relationships transform, power dynamics shift. Those who once had leverage over you lose it. Those who were drawn to your weakness disappear, and those who are aligned with your level, driven, disciplined, self-possessed, find you naturally. Because you are no longer searching for your place. You are becoming the place others search for. You are no longer asking what the world can give you. You are deciding what is allowed into your world. You have become the prize, not by pretending, not by performing, but by doing the work, privately, consistently, relentlessly, until your value is undeniable. Comment, I am the shift below, because you are not the same man who started this video. Number 10, the final word. Your empire begins now. Most content ends with emotion, a surge of motivation that fades in hours. But this is different. This is not about feeling, it is about building. So take this truth with you. Your empire does not begin when circumstances improve. It does not begin when people understand you, when money arrives, when opportunities appear. It begins the moment you decide, fully, honestly, without excuses, that you are done waiting. Niccolò Machiavelli's real lesson was never manipulation, it was mastery. The man who masters himself masters his fate. Everything else is noise. Psychology reinforces it. The world treats you according to how you see yourself at your deepest level. Change that, and reality reorganizes. Stoicism reminds you everything you need is already within you, not outside, not in validation, not in permission, in discipline, in will, in the daily decision to become. This is where Machiavellian thinking, dark psychology, and Stoic philosophy converge, not as separate ideas, but as one truth expressed in different forms. The most powerful force in your life is the man you choose to become in private. Your empire begins now, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, now. In the next decision, in the next boundary, in the next moment you choose growth over comfort. Go build, go become, go be so unapologetically yourself that the world has no choice but to make space for you. Comment, "My empire begins now," below, and mean it. And if this shifted something in you, if it sharpened your thinking or cracked something open, then subscribe to Machiavellian Galaxy and stay ready, because this is just the beginning.